We're now live. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Technical Advisory Committee meeting for Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. First order of business is the summary notes, and I'll group the notes, the March 19th and the May 21st meeting. I will have to abstain from the May 21st meeting. I was not here, but let's do the March 19th meeting. Any motions to approve? Seconded. Any objections to accepting those? Hearing none, they are approved. May 21st, I am abstaining, as I mentioned before. Motion to approve.
Motion approved.
Seconded over there. Any objections? Hearing none, they are approved. On to Mr. Jasper. You're up.
Thank you, Chair.
CRT.
Boys, members of the committee, I'll paste this at whatever speed you want us to go at. I'm joined this evening.
Alacrity is appreciated.
Ms.
Summary.
Levin is here again to answer your questions as we go through. And the purpose of this item this evening is to seek your endorsement of the NVTA staff recommendations for the BRT action plan, previously referred to as the preliminary deployment plan. We're going to cover a few things very quickly for you, some of which you've heard before, so we won't go on those. But while this is getting this loaded, I think you've got the slide deck as well, so I don't need to read this to you, but what is the BRT action plan? Highlighted in yellow on this slide. I'll point at the screen or do I point at you?
There we go.
Okay. Strong blueprint to develop BRT lines incrementally function as an integrated system. These are kind of really key points of what we're trying to achieve here. Let's be clear, we're not talking about dedicated right-of-way everywhere on day one. The BRT action plan is not a detailed design or an operational plan. It is a high-level blueprint, which if you endorse and NVTA approves, it will enable us to get closer to those detailed designs and operational plans. So let me look through these. There's the same things on there. So I won't talk about that, but my mantra is the same as it's been since we started this: think big, start small, build momentum. This is think big. This is start small. You may recall this, the transaction plan that you helped us to prepare and was adopted by NVTA in December of 2022. And in here, there was indeed a fledgling map of the BRT system, which we derived by the number of projects that are in the project list for this long-range plan. And for us, projects in the project list are an early indicator of potential funding requests to come. So that's like the start small piece. And then the building momentum, as shown here, are the 5 BRT lines that we're already funding. But since we are looking at potentially more BRT lines and funding requests coming to us, we wanted to have this action plan. So we had a blueprint, a big picture of what BRT might look like in the region, rather than just keep funding BRT lines one at a time with no reference to a big picture. So think big, start small, build momentum. We're at the think big stage. This has been a highly collaborative effort, leading the rows down counties, cities, towns, state and regional partners, transit agencies, and our friends across the river have all been a part of this. Through our BRT planning working group. That group has come together. Started with transaction, as I mentioned, also built upon MBTC's work, WMATA's work. The The interjurisdictional or multi-jurisdictional BRT planning working group has met 6 times during the course of the 18 months of doing this work. So, this isn't just, talking the talk, this is walking the walk. They've been involved with us all the way through this. More recently, we've seen DMV moves and SJ28 emerge as initiatives to look at transit funding, sustainable transit funding. We're participating in both of these initiatives. And then it's specifically with DMV moves, there are some bus priority components, which are very complementary to what we're doing here, where there's a geographic overlap. Key dates in the approval process, highlighted tonight's meeting. We've been through a number of meetings with you recently. Back in May, we briefed you on the findings of the public survey, and actually the meeting in March, the 2 meeting summaries you approved this evening. Dahlia briefed you on the findings of the technical analysis that we get done and the scenario analysis. And we briefed you various points during calendar year 24 as well. So I hope you feel well informed. We're not going to give you a whole lot of new information tonight because there's not a whole lot of more information to give you. But after this meeting, where hopefully you will endorse this, we'll go to our other statutory committee next week, and then our standing committee on planning and programming the week after that, and then we'll get to the authority hopefully for their approval in July. A couple of quick summaries. Very quick summaries on the survey findings and on the technical analysis.
Yeah, and most of this is not new information. We talked about it in March, we talked about it in May, but there are a couple of new things either up on the screen or in your slides if you want to read nice things that members of the public said about our project, which is, as we know, a little bit rare. So just a couple of new pieces since we spoke last month. There were 587 completed surveys. That's not new, but we got over 1,500 comments across 7 open-ended questions. We specifically asked folks things about where the routes went, how frequently they came, the times of day that they operated, things like that. So not surprisingly, we did get a lot of comments in answer to those questions. But we also got a lot of just generally supportive responses to sort of open-ended questions. So we talked about this last time, 72% of respondents indicated that they would be likely to use the BRT system. We know people tend to overstate that. That's still really great. And we also got 31% left a just generally positive or supportive comment. My favorite part is only 5% left a generally negative comment. If anyone has ever been involved in a public engagement process before, you know how magical that 5% number is, and I'm super proud of it. So that's really exciting. You can read some of the positive comments that we got on the screen, but that's generally the overview. And then in March, we went over a lot of the evaluation results. This will all look familiar from the plan itself if you've seen it, but looking at ridership forecasting, looking at about 47 million riders annually by 2045, looking at the scale of mode shift that we're able to achieve, benefits for equity emphasis areas, reductions in congestion and emissions, increasing transit accessibility, avoiding crashes and the costs associated with those, and bringing in sort of fare recovery. I can go through the numbers in detail if anyone wants, but these are not new. These are the same that we've seen before. So just really sort of highlighting the major impacts and positive impacts that a system this big and visionary could have for Northern Virginia.
Okay, so just to recap, generally positive support from community members, including drivers, which was, for me, was the most exciting part, is that drivers are saying they're willing to try this, and it meets their needs. It has to be fast, frequent, and reliable. That's the underlying assumption, and that means obviously there has to be some bus priority measure in here as well to make that work. The technical analysis, as Dario said, was great in that it was showing something that's really important to NVTA, a modal shift, because without modal shift, we don't get congestion reduction. But when we get congestion reduction, that really excites us. And so, some very provisional kind of proxy type analysis we've done indicates that many of these BRT lines, if they were submitted to us as funding applications, would be in the competitive range. By that I mean they would probably score quite well against other candidate projects that are submitted to us, and that's good to know. I would hate to think there's all this positivity, but at the end of the day, our analysis shows that they don't qualify for funding because they don't perform enough. But that was not the case. Another thing which doesn't come out through this, but through the working group and through more recent discussions with transportation leadership across the region, there's overwhelming support for what we're trying to do here. There's lots of questions on the details, but we're not at the point yet where we can get into the details. We kind of have to get that broad buy-in first, and hopefully you'll share that with us. Certainly more public facing outreach and education is needed as well. So this is a very dense slide. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but if implemented, there are a lot of things that this action plan will enable to enhance regional transportation, from making sure that NVTA's investments in BRT related projects continues to show a good return and a meaningful alternative to driving, so that there are other ways to get around the region without having to drive. We want to make sure that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I've said that before. Customer experience is very important to all of this. We really want an integrated and interoperable system, and we're only going to get that if we have that big piece at the front. We've made allowance in the analysis for the expansion of the need for vehicles, for capacity to store the vehicles, maintain them, and potentially even zero emissions vehicles. And the other thing that's kind of surfaced towards the end of towards the end of our work is that a number of the transportation leaders have said to us that if there's an action plan like this, it will make it so much easier to make the case for state and federal funding to be able to say this is part of a big picture in Northern Virginia. This isn't just a standalone effort. So you have the documents. I apologize we couldn't get it to you any sooner. We had to kind of tie things back to the authority meeting last week, so we had to kind of follow a process. Most of what is in the document is unchanged from the version that was made available for public comment, and I think we shared that linkage with you, over the course of the last month. The main change in the document is in section 8.0, specifically 8.2, where we added recommendations. In the draft version of the document, we just had a placeholder. So we filled in that placeholder now. There were some minor revisions. A few of them are listed there. There were others too, but they're not substantive, and they're either just clean up or bringing things up to date. For example, when we put the draft document out, the corporate projects for the upcoming 6-year program was in the future. It's now in the past, so we kind of changed that kind of wording. We added in a sprinkling of the spring 25 survey results, which we'd already shared with you. They're now in the document. And a few other minor things as well, but nothing that would change any of the building blocks on which this is built. So in terms of the actual recommendations, let me get straight to them. And overarching, our recommendation is to keep going. We've kind of created what we consider a fairly substantive body of work that shows that that the public is supportive, that the numbers are supportive of the impact. that the regional staff are supported. Everyone wants to know the details. But now is not the time to stop. So more detailed deployment planning from NVTA's perspective. We also are making recommendations which we shared kind of on a one-on-one informal basis with jurisdictional leadership and agency leadership. There's some things we want you to do as well. So let me get into those just very quickly. There are 5 areas for NVTA covering funding, additional evaluation, knowledge transfer. We don't like reinventing wheels. We like capturing the experiences of others, applying them where appropriate. Development of guidelines of best practices, and we're not going to be too prescriptive here, but for example, one case came up just today. One of our jurisdictions said, okay, so if we're going to put a station at this location, how big of a geographic footprint do we need for a BRT station? Good question. That's the sort of thing that would answer going forward. So we don't have that answer today. We have to kind of think about branding. We're not going to make every transit agency rebrand their buses and call them different things for this, but we've got to think about how we present it as a unified, integrated system, not anything that's kind of fragmented. And then at the end, last but not least, the ongoing need for education, consensus building, including for the business community. For the jurisdictions and agencies, generally speaking, they understand why we're asking for these and have indicated no specific pushback on any of these things so far. But we are asking jurisdictions to consider BRT and BRT-related facilities when they next update their comp plans. Obviously, everything starts in a plan somewhere. So comp plans, transit plans, other kind of local area action plans, and so on. Start thinking about that as you go through that process. And a lot of them have said, oh, we're actually just about to start doing that right now. It's a good time. We'll put it in there. Others have said, we're actually working on some projects now. Should we slow them down and revise them? Well, we need to have a conversation about that. But they're kind of understanding why we're asking for that. Transaction project list, we want them to validate or verify that the project descriptions that are in transaction match the BRT, the 28 BRT lines. And if they don't, to make sure that when we update transaction next time, that they are consistent. So, there's going to be a short period of time. If something isn't in transaction, we can't fund it. But I don't think that's going to slow very much, if anything, down, because the next transaction update should be adopted in December or by December of 2027. So we're not too far away from that. And when they do submit BRT funding requests to us, we're going to work with them to understand that the requests that they're making are consistent with the action plan. We're not going to mandate that they be consistent, but the whole point of doing this is to collaboratively decide what is the best thing. So, if there needs to be tweaks to the routes or the station locations, fine, but consistent in terms of what we're trying to achieve is what we'll be looking for when we get those funding requests. Equally, when as things get developed, they're going to get developed at the local level. It's NVTA. It is not our standard operating procedure to develop the projects that we fund. That has to be driven by the local level because they know the communities best, they know the circumstances best, and they can take into account a lot of things that we would not take into account. So that we want the jurisdictions to take the lead in the development of BRT lines, and where necessary, if there's an overlay, as our analysis has actually been based upon, of BRT on top of existing local bus services, then at the local level they need to decide, do those bus services locally need to be restructured to be more complementary with BRT? That's a locally driven decision. It's not an MBTA driven decision. And finally, and I hope this is low-hanging fruit for all of them, to continue engaging with us to develop the action plan through our BRT planning working group. I would say, just for reference, the last meeting, which wasn't too many weeks ago, had over 50 participants on it, which, you know, is an indicator of a pretty high level of engagement across the region and beyond Northern Virginia. So we want them to continue. We actually want that group to expand. Some of our smaller jurisdictions have a hard time sending staff to things like this because they're too many to do, but even there, they're beginning to say, yeah, I need to be at the table when you have these discussions. So I think that is my last slide. I'm sorry that's taken
Thank you.
15 minutes, but we are happy to take any questions you may have on any aspect of this.
And I probably should have asked this last month, but considering this plan would probably take 25, 30, maybe more years to be implemented. And conditions may change, particularly in some of the outer jurisdictions. Will there be a process that would look at this action plan on a periodic basis or adjust to changing conditions?
I should have preempted the question you should have asked a month ago, by saying absolutely yes. I mean, circumstances change. The action plan is not in terms of the routes, but the alignments, the station locations, terminal points are not set in stone. You know, as corridors densified, then that may create opportunities that may change what our understanding is today. Our analysis is based upon the cooperative forecast for 2045, and obviously over the next 20 years they can change. So certainly I think there will need to be a periodic review. Personally, I think it would be logical to do that every time we update transaction, because this is kind of like a parallel initiative to transaction. There may be an argument for doing it, you know, at one intermediate point between the transaction update. So like every 2 to 3 years. We haven't taken a position on that, other than I agree with you that it's not one and done. It's living.
Has there been conversation about incorporating this into the comprehensive plans of each county and jurisdiction that we're talking about?
We have asked the jurisdictions to consider doing that. We're not mandating that they do it.
Right.
We're trying to make the case that it's not a no-brainer, but it's a logical thing for them to do. But
Yeah,
that's a local driven decision. But we have asked,
right.
and that is one of our recommendations.
Years ago, like early 2000s, it was discussed in the Prince William County Comprehensive Transportation Plan that I was part of. And this body, years ago, back when there was another chairman before me, even discussed this. So this has been discussed for a long time. I had hair. Yeah. Armand might have had hair. You might even remember, you weren't part of that. Yeah.
Well, so many of these routes look to me like they're jurisdictional. So I'm thinking of the just funding applications. Do funding applications come in from multiple jurisdictions, or would they look for funding just for their particular portion of that? How would that work?
Very good question. Again, it has come up from our jurisdictional staff from time to time. Our expectation, I think, would be that you know, requests for funding have to be for BRT lines. You can't really request funding for a segment of a line if there's no logical endpoint to that line. You know, if it doesn't really take you from somewhere to somewhere, then it would call into question the viability of that line. I can't completely rule it out in every case, but you know, our hope would be, as you point out, a lot of these lines do cross jurisdictional boundaries, and when funding requests come to us that touch multiple decisions, we expect governing body resolutions from every jurisdiction that it affects. So if it goes through 2 or 3 jurisdictions, we'd be looking for governing body resolutions from all of them for a particular line. And that, we'd also need to have some clarity about, which transit agency or agencies will be operating it. So it's kind of different from, much of what we've seen in the past. From time to time, we do get funding requests that require governing body resolutions from multiple jurisdictions because the nature of the project crosses or touches adjacent boundaries. So it's not groundbreaking. It's not a precedent for us, but I think the point you're making is that it will become more normal for this sort of project.
The last one to not ask any questions.
I know, I feel so well informed from the previous 2 meetings, seriously. Lots of great information. I was considering the amendment question, but you asked it, so I'm all set. No questions for me. Thank you very much.
I have one, just one. So in the recommendations for jurisdictions and agencies, I mean, I understand this, but I understand why it's here. Recommended that jurisdictions and agencies confirm that BRT routes and related facilities are correctly identified. Fine. Ensure they demonstrate how such requests are consistent with the action plan, including for implementation and operation. So what will happen if a jurisdiction comes in with a request that doesn't quite line up? Like, how will that be handled? Again, these are all theoreticals right now.
Yeah.
So but I'm sure you put some thought into it.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what we worded that carefully to say consistent with, as opposed to identical or something like that, because there has to be wiggle room, because particularly at this stage, but even 10 years down the road, I don't know that we could be in possession of all the knowledge to say it has to be exactly this. So it will really depend on how much of a variance there will be on key points. But it's hypothetical. Until we get a real example, I don't know how we'll react to it. But broadly, if it's we would want it to be something that could be branded and promoted as part of the system. That's really the key thing here, is that it is that kind of interoperability and connectivity. Where lines cross, we want to be sure that folks who have to transfer between lines have the most seamless experience possible. Headways, the extent of operation during the week, hours of operation. But if a jurisdiction wants to move a station 1 block because they think there's more density at the other location than this location, that wouldn't be a significant departure. But say if a proposal was to put, where we have maybe 2 stops, to put 10 stops, then that really is moving away from what we kind of think about as contributing to fast, frequent, and reliable, because that's kind of going back to being more of a local bus service. And even then, it's not to say we wouldn't fund it. We certainly wouldn't stop someone submitting a request for it. But if it's not fast, frequent, and reliable, then it may not, reach the threshold for NVTA funding.
So building on that a little bit and getting back to the plans, the county's plans that they have, was the transfers done? Did you look at which county comprehensive or countywide transportation plans had BRT or managed lanes in their plans? And were all of those locations vetted? For example, Loudoun has it for 28, 50, and 7. Were all 3 of those considered, or was that kind of just
So when we were putting together the version of the system that was actually last summer, right, we looked through not only the comprehensive plans, but each jurisdiction's, whether they have a TDP or a TSP. We were also coordinating with the regional corridors of regional significance that were identified in the NVTC regional bus transit study and the WMATA Better Bus Network redesign to incorporate all of that. So there was actually a much longer list of corridors that we looked at, some of which were screened out for a number of reasons. Some the jurisdictions were not interested in, Okay, that's easy enough. The density wasn't there either now or by 2045 to really support those, and some other pieces as well. But that's all the sources that we use to sort of come up with those.
Keith, do you expect that this plan would make it easier to go through, assuming FTA funding continues in the future, would make it easier to present one of these projects as a major investment project with FTA? And do you think that they would then still require going through a whole alternatives analysis?
I can only speculate on that because we haven't spoken with FTA yet. That is one of the things that we've identified as a recommendation going forwards. Several fairly senior transportation leaders in the region have said it would definitely help them to have a plan like this if they are going to submit. They also said it may make more sense for NVTA to submit for funding, just to kind of reinforce the fact that, you know, this is part of something that's bigger than just the funding request that's being made. You know, we talked, I think it came up last month, about whether, you know, NVTA could, you know, think about helping to build a model that would be compliant with what FTA's requirements are for evaluation of project. But really, I think that for us, the starting point would be, if we get the clearance to do so, would be to go to FTA and talk this through. I mean, I imagine the FTA staff themselves at the moment don't know for sure what, but I think I've read an announcement recently that there were some funding announcements made related to
Still
the.
funded a few projects.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't see the funding's been switched off. There's just been a pause on the funding at the moment. And, you know, we want the region to be competitive for federal money and for state money. And anything we can do to help that, we will explore relentlessly. Because we can't do it all on our own. And we don't want to do it all on our own. It's a regional thing. So others have got to play their part, but we'll play ours for sure.
All right, looks like we have an action item here. Do we have any other discussion on this before we make a motion to recommend approval of the BRT action plan? I'll make the motion. I'll go outside of my comfort zone and I'll move to that the TAC recommend the NVTA approval of the BRT action plan, including the next steps and recommendations. Any seconds?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. It is passed. Congratulations. Ms. Sink is next.
Yes, hello, good evening, members of the TAC. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we're here.
Fabulous. Okay. Just giving a quick reminder of where we are in updating our strategic plan. So I last briefed you back in March, the draft vision, mission, core values, and goals that we were going to take for our strategic plan. Since then, we took it through the committees and went to the authority, and they approved the vision, mission, core values, and goals for the strategic plan at their May 2025 meeting. Basically what's shown on the slide here. There were a few minor changes to some wording from what I briefed to you in March. The NVTA mission incorporated our core values. That's one of the directions that they wanted from the authority. And the definition of goal 1 was edited to kind of start off with in collaboration with jurisdiction agencies. We really wanted to highlight that, you know, NVTA is a collaboration effort across the region to get these things done. So that has all been adopted, and that's basically the top part of our pyramid here. And the other thing I want to note is that these goals are in alignment with NVTA's legislative mandates. So we're not going outside of the law on what we were requested to do. So the next steps are that bottom half of the pyramid. We want to create strategies and metrics that align with those goals that we just got approved. So that is what we're working on right now. We're working to draft those strategies and metrics. We want to take a high level approach to be able to give us the flexibility to incorporate all the things that we can accomplish within the next 5 years. So those strategies are going to be kind of high level, and we're looking to have about 4 on average for each goal. And that's going to be detailed statements on how NVTA can achieve those goals. That's what a strategy is about. And then the metrics we're also going to take using a high level qualitative approach. Metrics are going to be drafted in a more flexible and consistent way to assess the alignment and advancement of each goal. And then NVTA staff are going to provide annual updates on the strategic plan that highlights how we're advancing and achieving these goals. And that's really kind of where the metrics are also going to play out, is that each annual update of how we're performing. So in this essence of the time frame of what we're taking for the strategic plan is that after, drafting the strategies and metrics, we're going to create the full strategic plan, and then we're looking for the full adoption of the authority is anticipated in the fall. So what I'm looking to bring to you as the committee right now is just kind of open it up for questions and feedback, any insights that you have on considerations that we should take when drafting specifically these strategies. So you have these 4 goals up here, thinking that we're going to kind of draft high level strategies that are a little bit more detailed on how we want to achieve those types of goals. Anything, kind of open it up to consider for your feedback, because we don't want to miss anything that we can be achieving in these 5 years. So with that, I will take questions and open it up for discussion.
Are we rehashing what we've done in the past on this too? Go ahead.
In the sense of the 2017 strategic plan that we have done?
Right. Yeah, I don't mean that we're plagiarizing what we and recooking what we already did, but there are some strategies and metrics that we decided on that are still valid.
Yes.
Don't want to recreate the wheel. Yeah.
That's correct. A lot of these goals that we took kind of built upon what we had outlined in the 2017 strategic plan, but really this strategic plan takes a little bit further. A lot of what we had in that 2017 plan was very aspirational and I'd say even higher level than what we're taking right now. This plan is kind of narrowing in specifically things like, goal 3, enhancing regional planning through technical assistance and data-driven information. We've had goals in the strategic plan, 2017 strategic plan, that kind of advanced our in-house modeling capabilities and data analytics. We're just kind of advancing it even more here. So we're not necessarily recreating the wheel, we're refining and smoothing out the wheel here for our next 5 years.
Taking the lumps out of the wheel. Okay.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm struggling to remember what we did in 2017, but yeah, I remember we went through this pretty extensively. So I'm glad to hear it's not all being pushed aside and redone.
Go
ahead.
Just to give you kind of a little bit more considerations on a draft type strategies that we're looking at here is we've kind of started to draft some, so it hasn't been, shared widely yet because this is just internal staff working. This is kind of where we're going through the committees to get feedback to make sure we're incorporating everything. Strategies on goal 1 are going to be kind of developed to have wording that says things of action of taking, sustain and evolve regional coordination to advance our multimodal policies and projects. We want to develop and maintain regional transportation plans and initiatives to reflect the region's needs, deepen our NVTA regional leadership. So that's kind of playing on all that lead the region's transportation initiative. So really kind of taking that action type statements for that. Goal 2, with the project delivery and project selection process. This is really kind of getting into our 6-year program. We want to have wording that allows us to maintain and evolve our 6-year program. It's a great process so far, but in the next 5 years, how can we kind of make it even better, or how we want to evolve it? So we want language in that. We want to be able to advance our life cycle monitoring and performance tracking of our projects. That's a strategy. We also have strategies to strengthen our project accountability tracking with kind of the project delivery goal that the authority gave us. We want to expand public accessibility and transparency of our projects, through updating our dashboard and gateway, things that we have done. And this is also things that we have outlined in our 2017 plan. Moving to goal 3, we have strategies that are talking about supporting modeling efforts to NVTA's initiatives, exploring opportunities for data sharing and collaboration with regional partners, enhancing regional insights and scenario planning capabilities, as well as using data-driven tools to promote transparency and deepening public engagement. And then lastly, with goal 4, kind of the standard one, because we're a funding entity, we have strategies of continuing NVTA's reputation as a predictable long-term funding partner, protecting NVTA's credit rating, evaluate NVTA's investments and economic benefits to the region and the Commonwealth. This is playing on the fact that we do an economic analysis on our funding. We want to continue that and evolve and advance that, as well as we want to pursue federal and state funding opportunities, kind of as Keith noted within the PDP BRT, in all assets of funding these projects. We want to be an advocate. And again, this is in line with our legislative mandates that we are to advocate for the region to federal and state funding. So those are kind of draft strategies that I have there. I know I kind of threw a lot at you, but just kind of thought processes to digest and comment on.
So just, I promise, we're not gonna get down into the weeds of this yet.
Mhm.
I'm sure we will, because we did the last time as far as metrics go, because we always will get into the weeds on metrics. Just out of curiosity, when you were speaking about metrics just briefly before, you mentioned it seemed to be like a focus primarily in qualitative metrics. So I just want to get a sense of where you see the mix between qualitative and quantitative metrics, and also just in general, you've got 4 goals here. How many metrics are you thinking for each of these goals, just to get a sense of what we're talking about, just as we're getting started, that is?
Absolutely. So having kind of the 4 strategies, once we flesh that out, we'll have a better idea of how we want to actually word those metrics. But going along the lines of kind of what we're thinking about right now with the strategies, the metrics, I'm kind of thinking of taking a similar approach of having about 4 for each goal, and playing a little bit more, like you mentioned, on that qualitative factor. So having kind of high level metrics, because as I noted on some of our strategies that I outlined, it's going to be very difficult to quantify that, because we're taking that high level approach to encompass everything that we kind of want to do within 5 years. So it's more kind of statements on things that we are going to be tracking. And this is where I think the annual updates on the strategic plan is really going to hash out our metrics, because we're going to be able to quantify it much more within our annual updates to show that progress. So right now, kind of metrics that I have outlined and type of language to take with them, something in the terms of, let's say, goal 2 for the project delivery. We want to evaluate completed projects to assess long-term performance and impact. So that's kind of a metric we want to do, is we want to evaluate that. And then in annual updates, we can then say, okay, we evaluated X projects, we saw X benefits. And that's really where the kind of quantitative factor comes in.
Monica, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I was going to note is that at your next meeting, we will have the proposed strategies, or have them fine-tuned so that you could see them and react to them. I know it's a little difficult to react to them when you don't have them written in front of you. And then I think we could have a more defined conversation on metrics. But the purpose of tonight was to, number one, let you know that the authority did adopt the goals along with the vision and mission statement. So now we are fine-tuning the strategies, and we do want your input on that. And then, as you noted, the metrics, which is really where the TAC got into the weeds, and we appreciate it. We can do that.
Michelle?
I just had a really quick question about one of the goals, recognizing that they have already been approved, but number 3, would you mind elaborating? It might be obvious to everyone else, but it's not totally obvious to me. What is meant by technical assistance in that? Is that technical assistance to localities?
Yes, we would want to be able to support we want to be able to provide the regional insight to some of these initiatives that we have going. I know that MCOG does a lot of work for the DMV region, but nobody's really looking specifically into the Nova region, and we're being able to do that and get down a little bit more to the local level. And Keith or Sri, I'm not sure if you want to expand a little bit more on the more technical insights for this TAC committee.
What's an example of technical assistance, I guess? Maybe it would help me understand what's meant by that.
Well, I think modeling might be an
Okay.
example.
Regional modeling that
Bigger jurisdictions can do it in-house, but the smaller ones
Right.
don't. So there may be some, cooperative things we can do in that area. We're building up our capabilities in GIS-based data analytics, and I think there's a lot we could do there as well.
Okay.
some of the
I understand now. Thank you.
transaction 2040 plan modeling is available as part of that as well. Kind of like seeing what the COG model said.
I was trying to figure out what the difference is between the technical assistance and the data-driven information, but I think I get it now. Thank you.
Monica, you had
No,
something?
and I was just going to add, and even with the statewide smart skill program, because right now we're actually going through it, and it's really helping to provide insight into how we can fare better with smart skill, and a lot of it is data driven, a lot of it is quantitative, but it's qualitative as well. And even the larger localities, we are we're working with everyone to try to get our hands on how the region can fare better in the smart scale process. And we've received questions from individual localities, but as a region as a whole, that's what we're doing as well.
Other questions on this? Comments? Nope. Thank you, Ms. Sink. Monica, you're up. Ms. Backman?
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I will note, we have a call for projects that is open currently. We are picking up fiscal years 30 and 31. And I've I've informed everyone that the application deadline is August 1. 4:59 p.m. The portal will probably close. And then the resolutions of support by the governing body are due October 31st. Again, 4:59 p.m. A few years ago, we went to electronic applications. So I've encouraged everyone, please get it in ahead of time. Also, we are undertaking a study of funding for bike pedestrian projects. We received a request from the chairs of the Senate and House Transportation Committees to review the work VDOT did a year or so ago, really doing an inventory on the bike ped facilities and needs in our region. So now it's our job to try to identify funding. I will tell you that we plan to use the work that NVTC in the region is doing regarding SJ28 and looking at some of the funding sources they have identified. But we will report out to this committee as appropriate, but we are in the infancy stages. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Is that something that the locality should be helping you with?
I will talk. So we will have a stakeholder group.
Okay.
The localities will be involved, of course, because we are also going to brief the regional jurisdiction and agency coordinating committee, and we will have a stakeholder group talk to you, the TAC, and the planning coordination advisory committee as well. Our goal, to be honest, is not to reinvent the wheel. Every year funding sources are on the table for various things, but I highly doubt we will identify a new funding source for this initiative.
After that. Okay.
Last question.
Yes, please.
Thank you for that update. I'm curious about that. I'm familiar with what you're talking about regarding that inventory that was developed and kind of an identification of where there might be missing links and whatnot. As part of this identifying funding, how is prioritization going to be considered?
So the request was not to prioritize, and I will tell you, we were asked to have this information by November 15th. We have a lot going on that is a stretch, and I don't think we will have it by November 15th, but I do think that there is the goal to have it prior to the start of session if there's, and to see for the legislators, to see if there's an a possibility, I should say, to put in a bill or something of that nature. I don't want to speak
Oh,
for
okay.
anyone, but the prioritization component was not requested in the letter.
Thank you. I understand now what you mean by you're looking for how to identify a funding
Yes.
source, and I get it now. Thank you.
Anything else for Ms. Backman? All right, thank you for that report. Looks like we're about done. Almost within the 59 minutes too. Sweet. I guess we're motion to adjourn, second, and we'll approve and we'll be on our way. Second. All right. We're done. Thank you for
Thank you.
listening and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.